The alien ship drifted through empty space like a dying bird. Its crystal walls, once bright and beautiful, now had huge cracks running through them. Air leaked out into the darkness, making tiny clouds of frozen gas that sparkled in the light. Of distant stars, Captain Veltar stood in the control room of the ship called Peaceful Dawn, his four thin fingers pressed against the communication panel. The small lights under his pale skin flickered weakly. He was tired, so very tired, but he had to keep trying. "This is Captain Veltar of the Zephyrian ship Peaceful Dawn," he spoke into the transmitter for the 100th time that day. "We are lost in the Kepler 442 star system. Our engines are broken. We cannot move. We have children on this ship. Please, if anyone can hear this message, we need help. We need someone to take us away from here before we all die." He released the button and waited. The only sound was the weak hum of the life support machines and the soft crying of Zephyrian children in the distance. His large, round eyes looked at the star chart on his screen. So many stars, so many worlds with intelligent life. Surely someone would answer. Someone had to answer. The Zephyrians were not fighters. They were peaceful people who traveled between worlds, trading goods and sharing knowledge. Their bodies were small and fragile, built for a gentle world with soft gravity and clean air. When problems came, they solved them with words and wisdom, not weapons or force. But wisdom could not fix broken engines. Words could not seal the cracks in their ship's walls. Veltar walked slowly through the corridors of his dying ship. Walls were made of living crystal that his people had grown over many years. In better times, the crystal would glow with soft, beautiful colors. Now it was dim and cold. Some sections had gone completely dark. In the main living area, families huddled together for warmth. The heating system was failing, and everyone wore thick blankets. Zephyrian children, no bigger than a human baby, stayed close to their parents. Their tiny hands glowed faintly with biolight, a sign they were scared. "Captain," called Elder Nimra from across the room. She was old even by Zephyrian standards, her crystal-like skin nearly transparent with age. "Any word from the outside?" "Still?" "Transmitting," Veltar said, trying to sound hopeful. "The Altarian Collective has ships in nearby systems. The Vegan Alliance trade routes pass through this area. Someone will hear us." But privately, he was worried. 3 days had passed since their engines died. 3 days of sending out emergency signals. The ship's computers said they had maybe 2 more days of life support left. And that was only if no more systems failed. Veltar returned to the control room and sent the message again and again. Each time he hoped for an answer. Each time he heard only silence. Then, on his 47th transmission of the day, something changed. A voice crackled through the speakers, but it was unlike any voice he had ever heard from the civilized worlds. It was rough and hard, full of strange sounds that made the translator work overtime to understand the meaning. "Zephyrian ship. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth vessel Iron Will. We got your distress call. We're coming to get you. We'll reach your position in about 6 hours. Get your people ready for rescue." Veltar stared at the communication panel in shock. Earth. He knew that name from the galactic databases. Though most civilized species preferred not to talk about Earth or its people. Humans were from a death world. A planet so dangerous that most species could not survive there for even a day. The air was poison to many races, the gravity was crushing, and the weather could kill. Humans had evolved from predators, creatures that hunted and killed other animals for food. They settled their disputes with violence and had spent most of their early history fighting wars against each other. They were barely considered civilized by galactic standards. Most species avoided them when possible, but they had answered the call. They were coming. Veltar activated the ship's internal communication system. His voice echoed through all the corridors of the Peaceful Dawn. "Attention, everyone. We have received a response to our distress signal. A rescue ship is coming. They will be here in 6 hours." He could hear sounds of relief and joy from throughout the ship. Families embraced each other. Children stopped crying. For the first time in days, there was hope. But Veltar did not mention that their rescuers were human. He was not sure how his people would react to that news. Elder Nimra came to the control room a few minutes later. "Captain, this is wonderful news. Which species is coming to help us? The Altarians? The vegans?" Veltar hesitated. "Humans," he said quietly. The old female's bioluminescent patches dimmed. "Humans? The ones from the death world?" "They were the only ones who answered," Veltar said. Nimra was quiet for a long moment. Like all Zephyrians, she had heard the stories. Humans were supposed to be brutal and savage. They ate the flesh of dead animals. They fought wars that lasted for years. They came from a world where everything was trying to kill everything else. "What do we know about them?" she asked. Veltar called up the files on his computer. "They are a young species, only recently joined the galactic community. They breathe oxygen and nitrogen like we do. They are much larger than us and much stronger. Their homeworld has heavy gravity and dangerous weather." He scrolled through more information. "They have a reputation for being ... aggressive, but also for being surprisingly helpful in crisis situations. There are reports of human ships rescuing other species, even when it put them in danger. And they eat meat," Nimra said with a shudder. "Zephyrians survived on light and mineral water, like plants." "Yes," Veltar admitted. "But the reports say they are very careful about what they eat. They have rules about it. Outside the ship, space looked the same as always. Stars scattered across the darkness like tiny diamonds. But now those stars seemed less cold and empty. Somewhere out there, a human ship was racing toward them, carrying people who had heard their cry for help and decided to risk their lives to save strangers." Veltar went back to his duties, checking systems and trying to keep the ship alive for 6 more hours. It would be close. The life support was failing faster now, and the hull cracks were getting bigger. But they just needed to hold on a little longer. As he worked, he thought about the human captain's voice. It had been rough and strange, but there had been something else in it too. Something that surprised him. Confidence. Not the arrogant confidence of a predator, but the calm confidence of someone who had dealt with emergencies before and knew what to do. Captain Morrison had not asked questions about payment or rewards. He had not demanded to know what the Zephyrians could offer in return for rescue. He had simply said they were coming. Maybe the stories about humans were wrong. Or maybe they were right, but being from a death world and being dangerous were not the same as being evil in 6 hours. Veltar would find out which was true. Peaceful dawn continued its slow drift through space, its hull cracked in bleeding atmosphere. But inside, for the first time in days, there was hope. Help was coming from the most unexpected source in the galaxy. They just had to survive long. Enough to see it arrive. The human ship appeared in space like a metal beast jumping out of hiding. The Iron Will was nothing like the elegant vessels that usually traveled between stars. Where other ships were smooth and curved, this one was all sharp angles and hard edges. Where other ships tried to look peaceful, this one was clearly built for war. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, looking at the alien vessel through the main viewing screen. His face was rough and weathered, marked by years of hard decisions and dangerous missions. His dark eyes studied the beautiful crystal ship that hung in space before them. "Sweet Jesus," whispered Lieutenant Amy Clark. She was the ship's expert. On alien life forms, a young woman with bright eyes and a quick mind. "Would you look at that thing? It's like someone carved it out of a giant diamond." The Zephyrian ship was indeed beautiful. Its walls were made of living crystal that caught the light from the nearby stars and scattered it into rainbow patterns. But even from a distance, they could see it was dying. Huge cracks ran through its hull, and pieces of debris floated around it like a cloud of glittering dust. "What's our status report?" Morrison asked his crew. Commander Paul Harris looked up. From his weapons and defense station, he was a big man with steady hands and a calm voice, the kind of person you wanted watching your back in a fight. "I'm reading about 800 life signs on that ship, Captain. Their life support systems are failing fast. The whole structure is coming apart." I'd say they have maybe 4 hours before the ship breaks into pieces. Morrison nodded. He had seen ships die before, and he knew the signs. Time to show these folks what humans do when people need help. Amy, I want you to get ready for first contact procedures. Paul, prep the rescue teams. And somebody get me a direct line to their captain. The bridge crew moved quickly to follow his orders. Within minutes, they had established communication with the alien ship. When the Zephyrian captain's face appeared on the main screen, everyone on the human bridge fell silent. Captain Veltar looked like something from a dream. His skin was pale and seemed to glow with its own light. His features were delicate, almost fragile, like they had been carved from moonstone. His large eyes were unlike anything the humans had ever seen, compound like an insect's, but somehow beautiful. When he spoke, his voice came through the translator as barely more than a whisper. Captain Morrison, we are very grateful that you came to help us. But we must tell you something important. Our ship carries a dangerous organism from our home world. It is locked away. But if it somehow got onto your ship, ... Morrison's expression did not change. His voice was steady and sure. Captain, my people have lived through ice ages that froze the whole planet. We've survived rocks from space that wiped out most life on Earth. We've beaten diseases that killed 9 out of 10 people. We're still here, and we're still fighting. Now, are you going to let us help you? Or are we going to sit here and watch you die? Sveltar was surprised by the human's directness. Most civilized species would have asked many questions, demanded detailed information about the danger, maybe even refused to help because of the risk. But this human captain seemed to think that danger was just part of the job. Yes, Captain. Morrison, we accept your help. Good. Now, let's get to work. What happened next broke every rule that civilized species followed when rescuing ships in space. Instead of carefully connecting their ships with special tubes and following safety procedures that took hours to complete, humans simply forced their way in. Chief Engineer Danny Martinez led a team of human engineers who used tools called plasma cutters to slice through the alien ship's hull like opening a can of food. The humans wore big, bulky suits that made them look like walking war machines, but their movements were careful and precise. Take it easy, people, Martinez called to his team over the radio. These folks build their ships out of living crystal. It's tougher than steel, but it can crack if you hit the wrong spot. Rodriguez, watch that support beam. Lieutenant Lisa Rodriguez was already working to strengthen the weak parts of the ship with emergency supports. She was small for a human, but strong and smart, with quick hands and a good eye for structural problems. Got it, Chief. This is amazing work, though. Whole ship is grown, not built. It's like a living thing. Inside the alien ship, Dr. Susan Blake worked with her medical team to check on the Zephyrian survivors. The doctor was a middle-aged woman with gray hair and gentle hands. But her eyes were sharp and missed nothing. The aliens were even more fragile than the human databases had said. Their bones were hollow like bird bones, and their skin was so thin you could see their glowing blood moving underneath. Many of them were weak from lack of food and water. They're malnourished, Blake reported to Morrison over the radio. They're terrified. They keep asking if we're going to eat them. Morrison's voice crackled back through the communication system. Tell them humans have a rule. We don't eat anything that can ask us not to. The rescue operation should have taken days according to standard galactic procedures. The humans finished it in 6 hours. They worked with a speed and efficiency that amazed the Zephyrians. They did not just take the survivors off the dying ship. They saved everything they could find. Cultural artifacts that told the story of Zephyrian civilization were carefully packed and moved. Scientific equipment was disconnected and transported with special care. Even the ship's computer records were copied and preserved so that nothing would be lost. The humans worked in teams, each person knowing exactly what to do. They had obviously done this kind of work before. When problems came up, they solved them quickly, without stopping to debate or form committees. Veltar watched the rescue operation from the human ship's medical bay, where Dr. Blake was treating his injuries. He had never seen anything like it. The humans moved through his ship like they owned it, but they treated everything with respect, were careful not to damage anything that could be saved. Your people are very efficient, he said to Dr. Blake. As she checked his vital signs, the doctor smiled. We've had practice. Earth is not a gentle world, Captain. We learned early that when disaster strikes, you move fast or you die. But we also learned that civilization is precious. We find it, we try to preserve it. But the real test came when they reached the deepest part of the Zephyrian ship, where the most dangerous secret was kept locked away. The plague organism was contained in a special laboratory deep inside the peaceful dawn. It was a twisted mass of living tissue that pulsed and writhed behind barriers of crystal and metal. This thing had already destroyed 3 Zephyrian research stations before they had managed to trap it. It was their shame, it's their burden, the reason they had been running through space when their ship failed. We cannot ask you to take this thing, Veltar said to Morrison as they stood before the containment unit. The human captain had insisted on seeing everything on the ship, even the most dangerous parts. Your species has no resistance to it. If it got loose on your ship, Morrison studied the writhing mass behind the crystal walls. His face showed no fear, only curiosity. What exactly is it? Veltar's voice was filled with sadness. A weapon, created by some of our people who forgot what it means to be civilized. It eats organic matter and makes copies of itself very quickly. We were taking it to the Galactic Council when our engines failed. Dr. Blake approached the containment unit with a scanning device. She frowned as she read the results. It's definitely aggressive, but ... She looked puzzled. Captain, I'm seeing something interesting here. Tell me, Doc. This organism isn't just a weapon. It shows signs of intelligent design, but not the way they think. It's actually a terraforming tool that someone turned into a weapon. Under the right conditions, this could bring dead worlds back to life. Morrison looked at Veltar with new interest. Your people were going to destroy this? It is too dangerous, the alien captain replied. The chance of disaster is too great. The chance of salvation, Morrison said. Doc, how long would it take you to study this thing properly? Blake thought for a moment. With our quantum laboratories? Maybe a week? Morrison nodded. We're taking it. The Zephyrians were shocked. They had expected the humans to refuse to transport such a dangerous thing. Instead, the humans saw opportunity where everyone else saw only threat. They were willing to take risks that other species would never consider. As the last of the Zephyrian survivors were brought aboard the Iron Will, Veltar realized something important. The humans had not just rescued his people. They had rescued everything valuable from his ship, including the dangerous knowledge that other species would have. Destroyed these humans from the death world did not think like other civilized species. They did not see danger as something to avoid, they saw it as something to understand and control. Maybe that was why they had survived their terrible homeworld. Maybe that was why they had answered a distress call that everyone else had ignored. As the peaceful dawn finally broke apart in space, its crystal walls shattering into a million glittering pieces, Veltar watched from the human ship's observation deck. His home, his ship, everything he had known was gone, but his people were alive. And somehow he thought they might be in better hands than he had dared to hope. The rescue operation began at dawn, ship time. The human crew moved through the corridors of the Iron Will like soldiers preparing for battle. But their weapons were medical equipment and cutting tools instead of guns. They wore thick environmental suits that made them look twice their normal size, like walking tanks of metal and rubber. Chief Engineer Danny Martinez checked his plasma cutter one more time before stepping into the transport pod. He was a short, stocky man with calloused hands and grease under his fingernails. He had been fixing broken things his whole life, and to him, the dying alien ship was just another broken thing that needed fixing. Listen up, people, he said to his team over the radio. We're going into a ship that's falling apart. The air is thin, the gravity is weird, and the whole structure could collapse at any moment. But there are 800 people in there who will die if we don't get them out. So we're going to cut them out, carry them out, and save every last one of them. Questions? And nobody had questions. The human rescue teams had trained for situations like this. They knew what to do. Lieutenant Lisa Rodriguez floated next to Martinez in the transport pod, checking her structural scanner. She was an expert at reading the stress patterns in damaged buildings and ships. Her job was to make sure they didn't accidentally cause the alien ship to break apart while they were trying to save it. The crystal structure is fascinating, she said, studying her readings. It's grown in layers like tree rings. Each layer has different properties. Some parts are harder than diamond, others are flexible like rubber. No wonder it's held together this long. The transport pod docked with the alien ship with a soft thump. Martinez activated his plasma cutter and began to slice through the crystal hole. The tool cut through the alien material like a hot knife, through ice, leaving smooth, clean edges that glowed with residual heat. "Breach in 30 seconds, he announced. On the other side of the hull, Captain Veltar and a group of Zephyrian adults waited nervously. They had moved all the children to the far end of the ship, afraid of what might happen when the humans broke through. Stories of human brutality filled their minds, even though these same humans were risking their lives to save them. When the whole section fell away, the first thing the Zephyrians saw were the glowing eyes of the human environmental suits. In the dim emergency lighting of their ship, the humans looked like monsters from a nightmare. They were huge, at least twice the size of a Zephyrian, and their suits made mechanical noises as they moved. But then Martinez pulled off his helmet, revealing a very ordinary human face with kind eyes and a reassuring smile. "Afternoon, folks," he said in accented English that the translators had to work hard to understand. "Sorry about the mess. We're here to get you out of this tin can before it falls apart. Anyone here speak Standard Galactic?" Veltar stepped forward, his bioluminescent patches flashing nervously. "I am Captain Veltar. We are grateful for your help, but you must understand, this ship is very dangerous now. The structural integrity is compromised in 17 different sections." Rodriguez was already scanning the area with her equipment. "Make that 23 sections, she said. "Captain, this place is going to fold like a house of cards. We need to move fast." The humans worked in a way that amazed and terrified the Sifarians. They did not follow any of the standard safety procedures that civilized species used. Instead of setting up secure transfer tunnels and following careful protocols, they simply grabbed whatever needed to be moved and carried it. Dr. Susan Blake arrived with the first medical team and immediately began examining the weakest Zephyrians. Her scanner beeped constantly as it analyzed their alien physiology. It's automatically adjusting its readings for their different biology. "Severe malnutrition across the board," she reported. "Dehydration, exhaustion, and what looks like radiation. Poisoning from their failing ship systems. They need immediate treatment." She knelt beside an elderly Zephyrian female who was barely conscious. The alien's skin was almost transparent, and her bioluminescent patches flickered like dying stars. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Blake asked gently. "We're going to take you somewhere safe." The old Zephyrian's large eyes focused on the human doctor with difficulty. Are you... Are you going to eat us?" she whispered. Blake smiled and shook her head. "No, ma'am. We're going to feed you." "When was the last time you had a proper meal?" "Days," the alien replied. "Maybe weeks. Time has become unclear." Blake signaled to her medical team, "Priority evacuation. Get her to Medical Bay 1. Start her on glucose solution, but keep it weak until we know how her system processes it." Throughout the ship, similar scenes played out. Human rescue workers found Zephyrian families huddled in dark corners, children clinging to their parents, adults too weak to stand. But instead of the brutality the aliens expected, they found gentle hands and soft voices. Corporal Mike Davis, a young soldier who normally worked in ship security, found himself carrying a Zephyrian child who was no bigger than a human baby. The little alien glowed softly in his arms, its tiny hands gripping his thick fingers. "It's okay, little guy," Davis said, even though he knew the child couldn't understand him. "We're going to take care of you." The child's parent, a female Zephyrian named Selwyn, watched in amazement as the huge human soldier cradled her baby, with infinite care. She had heard stories of humans being savage beasts, but this one was as gentle as any Zephyrian parent. Meanwhile, Martinez and his engineering team were performing miracles of structural repair. They moved through the ship like surgeons, identifying critical stress points and reinforcing them with emergency supports. Their work was rough but effective, buying precious time for the evacuation. Rodriguez, I need more support beams in Section 7, Martinez called out. That whole area is about to collapse. Already on it, Chief, Rodriguez replied. She was crawling through a maintenance tunnel that was barely large enough for her environmental suit, installing support brackets with mechanical precision. This is incredible engineering, by the way. They didn't just build this ship, they grew it. Every joint is a living connection. Save the science lesson for later, Martinez said. Right now I just need it to hold together for 2 more hours. The humans were not just evacuating people. They were salvaging everything they could carry. Scientific equipment, cultural artifacts, personal belongings. Even plants from the ship's garden sections were carefully removed and transported to the Iron Will. Lieutenant Amy Clark, xenobiologist, was particularly fascinated by the Zephyrian. Cultural items. She found a crystal sculpture that sang when touched, producing haunting melodies and mathematical harmonies. She found books made of living light that projected their text into the air. She found children's toys that responded to emotion, glowing brighter when held by happy hands. This is an entire civilization's worth of knowledge, she said to her assistant, Sergeant Tom Williams. We can't let any of it be lost. Ma'am, with respect, we're supposed to be rescuing people, not collecting souvenirs, Williams replied. Clark looked at him seriously. Sergeant, these aren't souvenirs. This is who these people are. If we save their lives but lose their culture, what have we really saved? Williams considered this, then nodded, and helped her pack another crate of alien artifacts. The rescue operation continued through the ship's corridors and chambers. Humans and Zephyrians worked together, though the size difference made it awkward. The humans had to be constantly careful not to accidentally step on or bump into the fragile aliens, while the Zephyrians struggled to keep up with the human pace. But gradually the impossible became possible. Family by family, room by room, the Zephyrians were moved from their dying ship to the safety of the human vessel. The Iron Will's cargo bays were converted into temporary living spaces. With soft lighting and carefully controlled atmosphere to make the aliens comfortable, Captain Morrison watched the operation from his bridge, monitoring the progress on multiple screens. His ship was taking on nearly 1,000 refugees, far more than it was designed to carry. His crew was working double shifts to accommodate everyone. His supplies were being stretched to the limit, but when Commander Harris suggested they might need to leave some of the cultural artifacts behind to make room for more people, Morrison shook his head. Negative, Paul. We take everything. If we have to sleep in the corridors ourselves, we take everything. Sir, the ship's not designed for this kind of passenger load, and we'll redesign it as we go, Morrison said. These people have lost their home, their ship, everything they owned. The least we can do is make sure they don't lose their history, too. As the last group of Zephyrians was brought aboard the Iron Will, Feltar took one final look at his ship through the observation window. The peaceful dawn was breaking apart now, its beautiful crystal hull cracking like an eggshell. Soon it would be nothing but debris floating in space, but his people were alive. All 837 of them, including the children, who had been born on the ship during their long journey. The humans had saved them all, not just the strong and healthy, but the old, the sick, and the very young. Dr. Blake appeared beside him at the window, holding a medical tablet with the health status of all the rescued Zephyrians. How are my people? Veltar asked. 3 days after the rescue, Captain Morrison stood in the deepest part of his ship, looking at something that could destroy entire worlds. The containment unit hummed quietly in the corner of the Iron Will's most secure laboratory. Inside it, behind walls of reinforced crystal and energy fields, the plague organism writhed and pulsed like a living nightmare. Dr. Susan Blake worked at a nearby console, her fingers dancing across the controls as she ran test after test on the dangerous material. She had not slept more than a few hours since they had brought it aboard, driven by a curiosity that her colleagues often said would get her killed someday. What have you found, Doc? Morrison asked. Blake looked up from her work, her eyes bright. With excitement, despite her exhaustion, "Captain, this thing is not what the Zephyrians think it is. Yes, it's dangerous. Yes, it can consume organic matter and reproduce quickly. But it's not a weapon, not originally." She pulled up a holographic display showing the organism's cellular structure. The image rotated slowly, revealing complex patterns that seemed almost artistic in their design. "This is a terraforming tool," Blake continued. "Someone took a natural organism that was designed to prepare dead worlds for life and turned it into a weapon. But the original programming is still there, buried deep in its genetic code." Morrison studied the display. He was not a scientist, but he had learned to trust Blake's judgment. She had saved his ship more than once with her quick thinking and deep knowledge. "What does that mean for us?" "It means we might be looking at the solution to one of the galaxy's biggest problems," Blake said. "Dead worlds, Captain. Planets that were destroyed by war or natural disaster. This organism could bring them back to life in decades instead of centuries." Morrison was quiet for a long moment. He thought about the Zephyrians, who were now living in his cargo bays, refugees from a dying homeworld. He thought about the dozens of other species he had encountered who were struggling to find new places to live as their old worlds failed. What would it take to make it safe? Blake smiled. "That's the beautiful part. The weapon modifications are actually pretty crude. Strip them away, restore the original programming, add some control mechanisms, and you have the most powerful terraforming tool in the galaxy." But as they talked, neither of them noticed that they were being watched. Captain Veltar stood in the corridor outside the laboratory, his large eyes taking in every word. He had come looking for Morrison to discuss arrangements for his people, but what he heard made his blood run cold. The humans were not planning to destroy the plague organism. They were planning to use it. Veltar's first instinct was to run, to warn his people, to demand that the humans dispose of the dangerous material immediately. Everything his species had learned about the organism told him it was too dangerous to exist, much less to experiment with. But he forced himself to stay and listen. "The real question," Morrison was saying, "is whether we have the right to make this decision. This organism has already killed millions of people. Even if we can control it, should we take that risk?" Blake nodded thoughtfully. "That's not a decision for us to make alone. But Captain, think about what this could mean. The Zephyrians could have a new homeworld. This could dozens of other species. Could turn the galaxy's dead zones into gardens. Or we could accidentally create the biggest disaster in galactic history," Morrison replied. "Yes," Blake admitted. "We could. But isn't that true of any powerful technology? Fire can burn down forests, but it also keeps us warm and cooks our food. The question is not whether something is dangerous, but whether we can use it responsibly." Veltar listened to this conversation with growing amazement. These humans were discussing the most dangerous organism in known space, and they were not talking about profit or power. They were talking about responsibility and the greater good. He thought about his own people's reaction when they had first discovered the organism. The Zephyrian scientists had immediately classified it as too dangerous to study. The military had wanted to destroy it. The politicians had wanted to hand it over to the Galactic Council and let someone else deal with it. But the humans were different. They saw danger and immediately started thinking about how to control it, how to use it for good, how to turn a weapon into a tool for healing. Morrison made his decision. "I want you to continue your research, but I want daily reports, and I want fail-safes built into everything. If this thing shows even the slightest sign of getting out of control, we destroy it immediately." "Understood, Captain. This stays between us for now. I don't want word getting out until we know for sure what we're dealing with." But it was too late for that. Veltar had already heard everything. Over the next several days, as the animal traveled toward the nearest space station, Veltar watched the humans work. He expected to see them treating the plague organism like a weapon, studying it for military purposes or planning to sell it to the highest bidder. Instead, he saw Dr. Blake working 18-hour days, carefully mapping every gene, every protein, every cellular function. He saw her building safety protocols that were more elaborate than anything the Zephyrians had ever designed. He saw her consulting with experts across human space, sharing her findings with the best scientists humanity had to offer. Most surprisingly, he saw her documenting everything in open files that any species could access. The humans were not trying to keep this knowledge secret. They were preparing to share it with everyone. One evening, as the ship's artificial night cycle began, Veltar found Morrison in the observation lounge, staring out at the stars. The human captain looked tired, carrying the weight of decisions that could affect the entire galaxy. "Captain Morrison," Veltar said quietly, "may I speak with you?" Morrison turned and smiled. "Of course, Captain. How are your people settling in?" "Very well, thanks to your crew's kindness. But that is not what I wanted to discuss." Veltar moved to stand beside the human at the observation window. "I know about the organism. I heard you and Dr. Blake talking." Morrison's expression did not change. "I see. And what do you think about what you heard?" Veltar was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. "My people created that thing, Captain. We know how dangerous it is. When we first discovered what our rogue scientists had done, our immediate reaction was to destroy it. The risk seemed too great." "But," Morrison prompted. "But we never thought about what you were thinking about. We saw a weapon and wanted to get rid of it. You see a weapon and ask how to turn it into something useful." Veltar's bioluminescent patches glowed softly in the dim light. "My homeworld is dying, Captain Morrison. Our sun is failing, and our planet grows colder every year. Within a generation, maybe two, my species will be extinct unless we find a new world to live on." Morrison nodded. "I know. It's in your files." "The worlds we can live on naturally are rare," Veltar continued. "Cold worlds with weak gravity and thin atmospheres. Most species cannot survive on such planets, so there is little competition for them. But there are so few of them, maybe a dozen in all of known space, and most are already occupied. But with terraforming technology, ... Morrison began. "With terraforming technology, we could live anywhere," Veltar finished. "Dead worlds could be brought back to life and made suitable for us. It would take decades, but it could be done." He turned to look at Morrison directly. "You humans are willing to take a terrible risk to give my people and others like us a chance at survival." "Why?" Morrison was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but firm. "Captain, where I come from, we have a saying. With great power comes great responsibility. This organism, if we can control it, gives us the power to remake worlds. That means we have the responsibility to use that power wisely. And if you cannot control it, if it escapes and destroys everything." Morrison looked out at the stars. "And we will live with that decision for the rest of our lives, however long that might be. But, Captain, the alternative is to do nothing while entire species slowly go extinct because they have nowhere to live. I cannot accept that alternative." Veltar studied the human's face in the reflection of the observation window. There was no arrogance there, no greed, no hunger for power. There was only a quiet determination to do what was right, even at great personal risk. "There is something else you should know," Veltar said. "The organism, ... it was not created by rogue scientists." Morrison turned to face him fully. "What do you mean?" "It was created by our government, in secret, as a weapon against our enemies. When it proved too dangerous to control, they claimed, it was the work of rogue elements, and ordered its destruction." Veltar's patches dimmed with shame. My people have been living with this lie for years." Morrison absorbed this information without judgment. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because if you are going to risk everything to turn this weapon into a tool for good, you deserve to know the truth about what you are dealing with." Veltar paused. "And because I want to help." "Help how?" "I am not a scientist, but I know this organism better than anyone, except the people who created it. I have studied the reports, the incident files, the containment procedures. If Dr. Blake is going to make this safe, she will need all the information she can get." 6 months later, Captain Veltar stood on the observation deck of Terra Station, humanity's newest research facility floating in space near Earth. Through the massive windows, he could see his homeworld in the distance, no longer the dying planet he had fled from, Green clouds swirled in its atmosphere now, and the ice caps were melting as the terraforming process brought warmth back to the world. The Genesis material, as the humans had named the former plague organism, had worked better than anyone had dared to hope. Under Dr. Blake's careful modifications, it had become exactly what she had predicted, a powerful tool for bringing dead worlds back to life. But the real miracle was not the science. It was what the humans had done with that science. In the station's main conference room, representatives from dozens of species sat around a large circular table. Altarians with their blue skin and musical voices, vegans with their tall, plant-like bodies, centaurians with their forearms and quick minds. Species that had barely spoken to each other before were now working together on the greatest project in galactic history. Ambassador Helen Davis, a gray-haired human woman with kind eyes and a firm voice, stood at the head of the table. She had spent her life bringing different groups together, and now she was bringing together different worlds. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the room's translation system. 6 months ago, we began this project with a simple goal: to turn a weapon into a tool for healing. Today, I am proud to announce that we have succeeded beyond our wildest dreams. She activated a holographic display that showed the current status of terraforming projects across the galaxy. While green dots marked worlds that were being restored to life, blue dots showed planets where the process was beginning. Even red dots, marking worlds that were still dead, had numbers beside them indicating when the terraforming could start. 17 species now have new worlds to call home, Davis continued. Dead planets that had been lifeless for centuries are growing forests again. Worlds that were poisoned by war are cleaning themselves. Children who were born in refugee camps are now playing in gardens on planets their grandparents never dreamed could support life. Veltar listened to the statistics with amazement. His own people had been among the first to benefit from the Genesis material. Their new colony world, which they had named New Dawn in honor of their lost ship, now housed over 1 million Zephyrians. The planet had been a frozen rock when they arrived. Now it had oceans and continents, weather patterns and growing seasons. But what impressed him most was not the scale of the project. It was the way the humans had managed it. Any other species that had controlled such powerful technology would have used it for advantage. They would have demanded payment, or political favors, or military alliances in exchange for terraforming services. They would have kept the best worlds for themselves and given the leftovers to others. The humans had done the opposite. They had shared the Genesis material freely with every member of the galactic community. They had published all their research, trained scientists from other species to use the technology, and even helped fund terraforming projects for species that could not afford them. When Ambassador Davis finished her presentation, the questions began. Most were technical, asked by scientists and engineers who wanted to understand the process better. But one question came from a source that surprised everyone. General Krax of the Altarian Military Council stood up slowly. He was an old soldier, scarred from many battles, and his blue skin was marked with the geometric tattoos that showed his rank and achievements. Ambassador Davis, he said in his deep, musical voice, I have a question that is not about science. Please, General. My species has been part of the galactic community for over 1,000 years. In all that time, we have never seen a species willingly share technology that could make them the dominant power in the galaxy. Why do the humans do this? I do. The room fell silent. It was a question that many species had been wondering about but had not dared to ask directly. The humans could have used the Genesis material to control the galaxy. Instead, they were giving it away. Davis smiled. General, that question assumes that dominance is what we want. It is not. Then what do you want? Davis looked around the room at all the different species, all the different faces and forms of intelligence that filled the galaxy. We want what every parent wants for their children. We want them to have a better future than we did. We want them to have safe places to live, clean air to breathe, and the freedom to grow and learn and become whatever they are capable of becoming. She paused, choosing her words carefully. General, humans come from a world that tried to kill us every day. We survived not because we were the strongest or the smartest, but because we learned to work together. We learned that when everyone succeeds, everyone benefits. When we lift others up, we lift ourselves up too. General Krax was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something that shocked everyone in the room. He removed one of his military decorations, a small crystal that marked him as a hero of the Altarian people, and placed it on the table. I have fought in 17 wars, he said. I have seen what happens when species try to dominate each other. It leads only to destruction and suffering. But I have never seen what you humans are doing. You have turned enemies into allies, weapons into tools, despair into hope. He looked directly at Davis. My people would be honored to call humanity our friends. One by one, other representatives began to speak. They told stories of dead worlds brought back to life, of refugee populations finding new homes, of species that had been slowly dying now thriving on terraformed planets. But they also told another kind of story. They talked about how working with humans had changed the way they thought about cooperation. They described new friendships between species that had been enemies for centuries. They spoke of young people from different worlds working together on projects that benefited everyone. Captain Morrison, who had been promoted to admiral after the success of the Genesis project, stood up to address the assembly. His hair was grayer now, and there were new lines around his eyes, but his voice was as strong as ever. Friends, he said, when we first rescued Captain Veltar and his people, we did it because it was the right thing to do. We did not expect anything in return. We did not plan to change the galaxy, just saw people who needed help, and we helped them. He gestured toward the holographic display showing all the terraformed worlds. What we have built together is not just new planets and new colonies. It is a new way of thinking about what civilization means. It means that when someone calls for help, you answer. It means that when you have the power to make things better, you use that power for everyone, not just for yourself. Morrison looked around the room, meeting the eyes of representatives from dozens of different species. The humans have a saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. It means that when conditions improve for everyone, everyone benefits. That is what we have tried to do with the Genesis project. We have tried to create a rising tide that lifts all of us. As the meeting ended and the representatives began to leave, Veltar approached Morrison. The Zephyrian captain looked healthier now, his bioluminescent patches bright and strong. His people were thriving on their new world, and children who had been born in the darkness of a dying ship were now growing up under the light of a young sun. Admiral Morrison Veltar said, I have something to tell you. What's that, Captain? When my people first heard your species had answered our distress call, we were afraid. We had heard stories about humans being dangerous, violent, uncivilized. We thought you might be coming to conquer us or eat us or worse. Morrison chuckled. And what do you think now? Veltar's patches glowed brighter. Now I think the stories were right. But your danger is not aimed at the innocent. It is aimed at the things that threaten the innocent. You are dangerous to suffering, to despair, to the belief that nothing can be changed for the better. He paused, looking out at the stars through the station's windows. My people have a new saying now, Admiral. When someone is in trouble, when hope seems lost, when the future looks dark, we say call the humans. Because we know that when humans hear someone ask for help, they do not calculate the cost or measure the benefit. They simply ask, what do you need? Morrison was quiet for a moment, moved by the alien's words. Captain, I think that might be the finest compliment my species has ever received. As Veltar prepared to return to his new homeworld, he looked back at the human admiral one more time. The humans had not just saved his people from a dying ship. They had saved entire species from extinction. They had turned weapons into tools, enemies into friends, despair into hope. But most importantly, they had shown the galaxy that there was another way to be strong, not through dominance or fear, but through service and sacrifice, not by keeping others down, but by lifting them up. The humans were indeed from a death world, and they were indeed dangerous. But their danger was the danger of hope itself, the dangerous belief that tomorrow could be better than today. Not ordinary people could do extraordinary things when they worked together.